done. Whereas the real damage is where? And right now, when it gets hit by a truck, you can tell your people there that you just wrote the violation because you got to show up there. It's a fire escape lottery ticket. Why? Got to repair the whole thing and load test it. So you can spot repair the whole thing, spot repair this, and then load test it. Who pays? It's the truck.
Now, are they bound by the 5-year load test going forward after that repair?
5 years later, they have to load test it again. If they certified it at that time,
Yeah.
5 years later, there's no load test because you're choosing other evidence of strength. And that could last 15 to 25 years if you keep maintaining it. Because the city's gonna always ask you, what are you providing me as other evidence of strength? Well, 10 years ago, we certified, we refurbished it completely. We didn't just spot repair, we refurbished. Oh, okay. And they'll accept the documents from the structural engineer. This is the only way wood is attached, guys. With a through bolt inside picking up the studs. 3/4 rod or 5/8 rod is the thing. If you see 1/2 inch or less, it's improper. And the giveaway that you have the wrong attachment is when you see a lot of lag screws. You see 6 lag screws going into a bracket. That's an indicator on a wood structure that it was improperly installed. And a lot of those aluminum fire escapes that you see, it's lag screwed in. Okay? And a lot of fire escape repairs, when they have to put in a bracket of some kind, they lag screwed it in instead of through bolting it. If for some reason you can't get in here and fix this with a through bolt, as soon as you put a leg here, do I need a through bolt? Nope. So now I can put 6 screws into the building, because I'm going to put a leg here to a sonotube.
So Cisco, on that, the aluminum one that we spoke about.
Lily?
Summer, yeah. What's your method of repair with that? Going through that?
Sure. Well, we discussed that briefly, but basically what you have is down in Fall River, New Bedford, there's a lot of those aluminum fire escapes. The railing is basically bent tube with fasteners that are like the 3/16 or 8 screws. So can we fix those? Yeah, you basically have to up everything into the 3/8. In discussions with the city official, start closing up some of the gaps because there's a pre-existing non-conforming structure that you have to deal with. How it ties in, it was tied into the grating, and the grating was handmade, 2-inch spacing instead of the 1-inch. So you just take that grating out, buy new aluminum grating from McNichols because they produce aluminum grating that meets the code. So you just drop new grating, and the angles were 1.5 inches. That the norm is 2 by 2 by 1/4. So as soon as you put 2 1.5-inch aluminums together, back to back, and sister it, I've exceeded the 2-inch requirement. So you didn't have to replace the fire escape, but we have to go in and reinforce it. So we're using an engineer drawing, which they haven't done as of yet, but the engineer drawing, which when he went back and looked at the case, there was no permit even pulled to do the job. So he had a choice to basically say, get this thing out of here, give me a brand new fire escape, or work with a client and say, hey, if there's a way to salvage this and still meet his requirement. So he basically said if they reinforce it and bring it up to code using an engineer, it's proof back to him that it was done correctly, he'll allow the reinforcement. Otherwise, get it out of here, pull a brand new permit, give me a set of drawings, and put up a new fire escape.
Are you
So,
looking at putting legs on something like that?
well, yeah, and you can do legs. So again, what can we do to basically answer? But if it's lag screwed in, we can just go in and put a through bolt. There's a lot of those, as you know, I think were lag screwed. Yeah, and actually, you can tell, there's usually 6 or 8 lag screws. That's an indicator.
Sheet metal screws.
And the sheet metal screws is but again, it was a guy that did aluminum siding. He primarily did a lot of his work down in Fall River, New Bedford, and in that area, southeastern Mass. But occasionally we've seen a few. This is sometimes some of the few.
We haven't actually gotten to it, I'm hoping we will, about when you have the counterbalanced ladders and stair systems, what kind of damage can occur from those?
He's a
onto
plant,
a
he
stairway?
actually works for me.
I'm concerned about what kind of, like wind loads. But those things, are they subject to wind load where they get like more snow loads? They can't catch and weight down and put additional stresses because it's not a regularly used staircase, but now you have that additional weight, dead weight, but live weight because it's a constant motion.
Yeah, we're going to talk to you about that right now. It's got a release arm on it. Here's the giveaway. You see a chain on your fire escape, on the cantilever. Let me explain how that chain got there. It's basically, if I get to a fire escape, and I'm going to talk specifically about cantilevers, in, you get to a fire escape and if the cantilever was pointing up to the sky, would you write a violation? That means it's out of balance. The weight box got filled with water, grew, and basically the cantilever started doing this. And then it pointed to the sky. And I didn't want a violation from you, so what did I do? I speak with my maintenance guy, I said, hey, what can we do here? He said, "Hey, let's go down to Home Depot and buy a piece of chain. And I'm gonna tie a piece of chain on the tail over here and just tie it back to a structural point or just anything on the fire escape that the chain will reach. Something that's within reach. So they'll tie it to a tread, they'll tie it to a rail bar, they'll tie it to the grating, they'll tie it, and now it's horizontal. And you're walking through your alleyway, you're gonna write a violation? No, well, I have to tell you, because you didn't know what the chain was for. You thought it was part of the requirement. It's not. A chain is what they use, because as soon as you cut that chain, you know what that cantilever does? Now, if somebody needs to get down that fire escape, how many treads do they walk out? 2, 4, 6, 8, before their weight counteracts? So, this is a properly functioning fire escape. And you're talking about one that has no release arm. What the norm is, when snow comes and pigeons land on it, does it drop? Yes. A properly weighted fire escape without no release arm, you're supposed to come here, step on the first tread, activate it. It is so perfectly balanced like a Swiss watch that when you step on it, it starts dropping 2 to 3 feet per second, hits the ground and stays down, and then you self-evacuate. And when the firemen arrive, they use the same fire escape to get into the building, if they need it. That's how it's supposed to be. But, yeah, well, it's a Swiss watch. That's a Swiss watch. Doesn't work, but, you know, it's a Swiss watch. But again, like you said, snow, pigeons landing on the end, what happens? So at 3 o'clock in the morning, the cantilever's down, who do you call? The tenant calls the landlord and says, hey, somebody's breaking into the building because the cantilever's down. So the landlord, to avoid having to go there at 3 in the morning to put his cantilevers up, did what? He put weight on the back, put a chain on it, and now it's always up in the air. So even if it goes down for whatever reason, tenant leaving by, you know, in the middle of the night or whatever, it goes up by itself. Is it legal? No. So if you see any chains on cantilevers, that's somebody who's modified it and it's weighted backwards. So now let's talk about what these release arms are supposed to be for. Single action requiring no special knowledge. I've got a woman that's basically egressing a fire. She's got a child with her. Do you drag a child or you put the child in front of you? In front. So this 150-pound woman takes this 50-pound child and they stop walking down the fire escape. And they get to this part. Okay? Now, let's take away the cantilever. And it's got a chain, I mean the release arm. There's a chain here and the woman basically goes down the stairs with the child in front. Actually, can she manage a child like that or she's going to get in front of the child? She's going to get in front of the child, right? This is new to her, right? Does she send the child first or is she going to go first? So she switches around and says, let me go. And so she starts walking down the stairs and then she gingerly steps on the first step and what happens? It's weighted backwards. She goes 3 steps out, what happens? 5 steps out, what happens? Starts moving a little bit, right? A couple more steps and that thing starts coming down 5 to 10 feet per second. Hits the ground, slams the ground and does what to her and the child? But she held on, screaming and yelling, right? Because she just, you know, she fell backwards, she held on, she grabbed the child, everybody's crying and screaming now, and so she gets down to the ground, and she gets off at the last tread that's down to it's on the ground, and she steps off with her 150 pounds and does what? The child is still behind us. All of a sudden this child gets sent 12 feet in the air. What happens to the child? The child holds on. You guys are all going to the side of this one. So the child is now 12 feet up in the air, screaming and crying. The mom's down below in her nightgown telling the child to do what? Does the child jump 12 feet? So the fireman comes running down the alleyway, right? Because the mother is running up the alleyway to do what? Get back in the building. She has the keys with her? So she's trying to get back into the fire to basically save who? The kid. So as she's running back to get in the front of the building, the fireman shows up, what's going on? She says, oh, my child. The fireman runs down the alleyway with her and says, hey, to the kid and tells the kid to do what? No. Kid does what? No. No. So the fireman runs back, so precious minutes are cooking right now. The fireman runs back and gets his pike pole. Does what? Holds it, brings it down. Steps on it, gets the child reunited with the mother. Then what happens? He stays there holding it, because the other firemen are all coming in, they all want to use the fire escape. If he lets go of this, where's it go? So that's not the way these fire escapes were built. And in Massachusetts, they all have release arms. Majority of them all have release arms. The way it's supposed to work, she arrives here with a child, releases it, single action, requiring no special knowledge, so it just, she pushes it out of her way, she can run through it, even if she doesn't see it. It'll pivot and rotate down here, and it rotates away from the cantilever. Cantilever weighs 25 pounds on the nose, because it's perfectly balanced now. And as soon as you release it, what happens to it? Goes down by itself, hits the ground, and stays down. She hasn't even reached the pivot point yet, and where is it already? She goes down, self-evacuates, the firemen show up there 1 minute, 10 minutes, or 1 hour later. What do they have at their disposal? Full set of stairs, if they want to use it. That's how release arms work. If you see a chain, it's an indication that it's modified. Here's one with no release arm, and what's happening to it? It's already, through weight or through improper whatever, it's already out of balance. And that's how these get smashed. Here's a release arm open, yet, and there's the chain. See the chain? So as soon as you see a chain, somebody has modified it. That's a violation of the fire code and the building code, because the cantilever is out of balance. Smashes and from trucks. Smashes from trucks. Smashes. When they get out of balance, the trucks always clip them. All cantilevers are usually 12 to 14 feet off the ground. And the reason being? Trucks. Staircases. You're gonna love this one, right? The staircases have the clips, the stringer clips that hold all those stairs. Sometimes the stringer clips are all shot. So entire staircases are ready to drop to the ground. This is a 24-story hotel in Chicago. This is a shot from the ground of one of the staircases. That was certified. What? One inch of rust, how many years? 50 plus. Treads from the ground, you look up, you start seeing treads. This is a life safety issue. When should they have written the violation? When the first tread fell, or when the 8th tread started falling by itself under a snow load? Cars backing in, trucks backing in. Trees falling. Rails, when rails sit right on top of the C-channels, they create a pocket that debris and rust and growth, and they start tearing apart the C-channels. Treads, the spacers, see, they rot inside. I can't fix those spacers. Can I get another 5 years out of this piece of grading? Yes. If I can put a piece of flat on top, a piece of flat on the bottom, and then every 6 inches or so there's a bolt, a carriage bolt, top head, and I basically squish to create a sandwich. Will I guarantee this back to the client? No. You got a pre-existing structure, but I can reinforce it so that it doesn't separate. But we should replace all your grading and all your treads that have these spacers inside with a new style of grading that doesn't have any of these spacers. They look like inside when they're rotting on. See, these are the rotted tops. Very difficult to fix. It's cheaper to replace. Can't weld them, right? The lead law won't let me weld them back at the shop either. Even though a lot of guys are going to take them back to the shop and weld them, you know, they're not supposed to. 50 years of rust on the trip. And some of these are schools. This is a school in New Jersey for elementary school. And that was near the shore, so you can imagine. Look at all the rust. I mean, how many inspections both by fire prevention and building department does it take for them not to see this much rust growth? Ladders. Ladders are a big issue, not only for the roof ladders, but these are the different types of ladders that are, this is West Coast ladders, a lot of them are 3 sliding ladders. Accordion ladders. The reason why they can have those is because they don't have any freeze issues. Otherwise, if you got snow and ice on this thing, it'll lock this baby up. But over there, they basically, you release that, and that thing just expands like an accordion. And it's a ladder that you go down, and they'll go 25 feet with that thing. That's how you get to the sidewalks in a lot of buildings in LA. Ladders on the side, fixed ladders. ladders with weight systems, so they gotta drop 2 to 3 feet per second to hit the ground and stay down. Roof ladders, a lot of times they brought out here, firemen are the only ones testing this, but under that rule, you inspect it every year. Management has to climb up and over these things to basically assure the firemen that the fire escape is in good order. This is something that's been, that we've seen a lot down in Jersey. That's called a modified ladder, where they actually cut the ladder and they created a flop out. It's called a flop out ladder, which is illegal, because as that thing swings out, what happens if you're underneath it when it's going through its full swing? It'll hammer you in the head. Okay, so these are illegal. This is somebody that didn't want to put in a weight or didn't want to put in a fold-out ladder, and so because of that, they basically created something. And there's a chain usually at the very top that you have to slowly let out as it does its loop. And no child, no old lady can handle those things, so basically it's a modification because everybody was breaking in to the building. So we get these, you say it's illegal, you have to either permanently affix it, and there's a lot of times when you can affix it and you can jump 7 feet off the ground. So 7 to 9 feet can be a distance that the last run is 7 to 9 feet off the ground. Again, we would speak with the city official on that, see which what they allow. Otherwise, they can do it permanently to the ground, or put weights on it so it drops to the ground, or they can also have a fold-out ladder. It looks like a drain pipe when it's closed, and then you hit it and it opens into what's called an expanding ladder. I think there's one at the Sun Building, an aluminum one. They took the cantilever out at the very bottom and they put this aluminum holder. That's actually an aluminum ladder.
Yeah, but
Those
it's got
things
a
are like
padlock on it, so it doesn't unlock.
Right, but that's basically somebody, and you can't do that. You can't take a staircase and put a ladder at the very end. You can't downsize a system. You can only increase the system. So by taking a staircase and putting in a drop ladder, it's an illegal.
That had gotten hit by all the trucks over the years, so they tore it out. That's fine.
Right. So, this is the, I'm going to show you what happens, the violence of a cantilever being dropped. Chicago. This is a company using this fire escape as a working platform. Can a masonry restoration company use a fire escape as a platform, a working platform? There's a release mechanism right here. Right, single action. As soon as you release it, 2 to 3 feet per second. Hits the ground and stays down. Look at the violence. The masonry company was using this 15 times a day to get materials up and down. This was not planned, but while we're there filming, what shows up, what typically takes cantilevers down that are not balanced or don't have a locking mechanism to keep it perfectly horizontal all the time. These trucks are usually 12 to 14 feet tall. Look how close they get to this fire escape. Now, that wasn't balancing. For some reason, the wind had blown it down a little bit. That guy can't see that, and he would have clipped that thing and dragged it to the ground. On this one, you'll notice the chain. So one is properly balanced, the other one has been modified by the owner of the hotel not to be hit by trucks. So what we're talking about now is we're going to open it up and start getting some questions to you guys as to what can be done at the city level. If you look on the back of your book, towards the very end of the last page, there's the steps. So as you can see, the first set that you want to do is you want to implement a Department of Procedures and Guidelines. So if you want to use some of the information on here, copy and paste it. Katie can send you the information on a Word document and just put it on your own city document. So you don't have to use this, but they make this for you. But basically create procedures and guidelines for everybody who's going to come into your city. So if you're an engineer, here's how we'd like you to kind of do it. If you're a repair guy, we'd like you to do it, but you always got to get a permit, and you always have to have some engineer watching you. That's all it says. And if you're going to paint it, and you're also the repair guy, just make sure you're licensed with the renovator's license to at least make sure you're not going to contaminate. Okay. The confidence test is the second thing that Bob has, is an industry standard confidence test, which is basically a final exam for the structural engineer. And there's specific questions, there's no opinion questions in there, there's like, is there any rust in any of the connections? And how have you verified the connection into the wall? So that confidence test is gonna tell you, and are you providing me with an opinion, or are we gonna load test this upon completion? Or are we going for certification on this one, which is a full refurb of every connection, and all the welded connections are gonna get rebolted so we don't have to x-ray this baby in the future. That's the only thing that we know we have to throw in this, is that the welded connection must be load tested every 5 years, but as soon as you bolt it, then it falls right into what the rest of the structure is. It's a bolted connection fire escape. So we're not telling you to cut the weld, we're telling you that the welds that are there need a bolt through it to basically eliminate it as a need for either radiographing or load testing. Okay? The last thing we have there is the, not the last, but the preliminary and final affidavits. Well, it's already standard for all your commercial stuff, isn't it? Am I wrong? Does anybody want to contradict that, to say that the construction control document, which is a mass document, is required on all commercial activity anyway, over 35,000, right? So all we've done is basically use that document, put in the language that is the mass code into the document and say, hey, you know, otherwise, do you even need this document with the language in it? Can you just use any standard, you know, preliminary affidavit documentation and final affidavit documentation that the state already provides you?
Is there a minimum level of detail that's required on the affidavits? In other words, do they have to be as specific as stair tread 3, level 4, tested, no tested, approved?
No, you're gonna get a report back from, you're talking about in the examination. The examination you get back is one of two, from a structural engineer who does a preliminary. When you read the confidence test, it's just yes, no, but it says submit a report on your letterhead that includes photographs. So there's a detail that comes from the engineer who inspected the fire escape, because it's that detail that's gonna come to you in one of two ways. One is that you have, because you can't issue a permit. The city won't let you issue a permit without some sort of report that says, what are we going to do here? So an engineer and or an architect can do one of two things, and it states right on the confidence test. You can draw the whole fire escape at great expense, and then put little arrows saying, fix this bolt, fix that bolt. And that's a huge expense for the client. Or, because a lot of the guys who fix these fire escapes are blue-collar guys, you walk through the fire escape with a can of paint, and the engineer basically spot paints it for dummies. He goes, photograph, photograph, photograph. That's it. That is what gets submitted to the city official, and they sit down at a desk and say, hey, these are all the things that I found. Vendor XYZ is going to come in here, pull a permit, and he's going to fix these things because the client has chosen to spot repair everything I've identified here, and then we're going to proceed to a load test. Or, here's some photographs, and basically we're going to change every bolt out. And I've already got 3 scheduled visits that I'm being paid for to basically watch this vendor, you know, change all these bolts to avoid the load test. And then at the end, when the confidence test is issued as a final affidavit, the city official still got to go there and do his final to close the permit. So sometimes the city official will go out and find something that the engineer missed. So there's sort of a double check that occurs, which was never occurring in 75 years. So what removes the violation is not the permit sign-off. What removes the violation is the issuing of the confidence test to the city official by the structural engineer that the fire escape has been certified or has been load tested. And a lot of times in your repairs, depending on how complex it is, you want to do all your repairs and you want to spot prime all your repairs, and you don't allow painting of the structure until everything gets examined by the structural engineer and the city official, depending on the complexity. So sometimes you won't let them close, like, I won't let you close the walls until I come and check it out. You know what I'm saying? So you don't let them paint or silicone shut the connections until you verify that you know, all the rust is gone out. So sometimes you walk up to a fire escape that's full of brown spots, and those are all the prime repairs. This is you know, we've trained, and so a lot of these classes are from, as you can see, Washington, D.C., where we trained about almost 50 inspectors, who in that year only wrote 2 violations. Why? Because a lot of times they say, we can't write a violation because we don't know how to answer it. You know, we don't know what to tell these people, short of, you know, just get it painted. And that's what happened. That was pretty much what occurred in the United States, is that the maintenance thing started 75 years ago, and it was vendor driven, not to pull a permit. Keep calling it maintenance and painting, and basically it got us what we have here today. The engineers weren't making any money on it because they did not do any proper oversight, so they were basically shot out of the box. So that's why when I mentioned in Boston, if you have a G3 license and you repair fire escapes, you think any engineer's really making any money in Boston? Because they were driven out of the market. But now, if you make it so that, you know, the fire escape must have engineer oversight, because it says anything that's commercial, it's going to require these preliminary and final affidavits. It's not happening in every city. So some cities are model cities, and then some cities host other cities to basically get the areas to start. But it's slow. It's like, you know, slow burning grass. It's going to take a while for it to catch. But, you know, we've taught all the 4 associations in Massachusetts, but not necessarily does everybody embrace it. They got too much on their plate. They've got other issues on their plate, and sometimes fire escapes is the last thing. So we've done the housing authority here. What's it called? The housing authority there. He looks like one of the guys here from the. But this is over there in Chinatown.
MBHP. Well, that's Chinatown.
Metro.
Metropolitan Boston Housing Partnership.
That's we've done there. So we've done classes, walked around. This is with us walking them all around. So we've done housing, we've done facilities management training, we've done building inspector training, fire prevention training. So, and again, all these codes, basically, the one thing that really helped us out is when we finally got, in training everybody, we started realizing that everybody had a base of fire code, NFPA, or International Building Code, and what we found is that they all said the same thing. We just explained it in these classes, that you guys, everybody in the maintenance or keeping of a building safe, they're basically all saying the same thing. The authority having jurisdiction shall accept by load test or other than evidence of strength. And the confidence test was one of the key pieces. It basically made everybody start not using the opinion letters anymore. And these departmental procedures and guidelines basically took away the use of some certificates that have that clause that says, to the best of my information, knowledge, and belief, fire escape is in conformity with 1001.3, which is just an opinion. So confidence tests are, it gets everybody's information. You need a preliminary confidence test, you need a final confidence test, you need a preliminary affidavit, you need a final affidavit, and it just basically starts putting some responsibility. And then you have the 1 year examination. So if you're examining the apartments or you're examining the commercial buildings once a year, you should get one of these every year. It's a nice reminder to the building owner that there's a 5-year rule, put a certificate on their fire escape, put a tag on their fire escape. We talked about all the, this is the Lowell letter that they sent out with the tax records. And all I did was tell everybody, hey, if you own a building in the city and it has a fire escape, be aware that there's a 5-year rule. So you may want to copy this, and he sent copies around, so you should basically have your building department send this out to known fire escape buildings, or to basically as part of the tax record, and this will make everybody aware. And some people not only own buildings in your city, they own buildings in other cities, and this makes them aware that in these other cities, they need to fix those fire escapes also.
Because 1001.3 is general enough to say all types of exterior means of egress, should the letter also say that, or should it really relegate itself only to exterior fire escapes?
Well, no, the letter that we have says fire escapes and similar structures, which is tied back into the language.
I'm thinking macro for the other municipalities that are represented here. What's your opinion that it should encompass the full language of 101.3, or?
I'll say it's a can of worms, and I think you should put the code, put the whole code in there, but primarily only focus right now on fire escapes. Let that be the driving force of why you're talking to people, because that's a life safety issue. And then let it expand in the next 3 to 5 years into decks, balconies, bridges, and such. All right, he asked me a question. This is in Jersey City.
Yeah.
Not Jersey City, I'm sorry. Elizabeth, New Jersey. This is a 12-story slidescape.
Imagine that.
It starts there, we're on the roof with the Elizabeth Fire Department, and every floor has these 2 little doors. And you're supposed to open them at every floor because it only has 1 staircase, and you're supposed, when you open the doors, jump and you'll out a potato sack. head first or not, into this dark abyss. So this is a photograph with a flash. Because as soon as you open that, there's no lights in there. And there's 12 people jumping into the same thing. So as you're coming down, there's some other guy saying, hey, it's my turn. And you go down 12 stories. You hit the last floor, and then you take a quick left turn. You go straight for 45 degrees. And you hit this metal door with a paddle that your feet are supposed to whack it and flip over this paddle. Or your head hits the paddle as it flips over this metal iron door. When we got there, the door wasn't working. They had to send a fireman down with a flash cannon, you know, they were holding him, pulling him up, holding him up with a rope to basically go down and basically kick the door open. This is the only slidescape. This is a, what they call a Art Deco building. Built in the 1900s, 1905. The floor's all metal, it's all riveted, you know, ducking. And it's all one way, so as you go down, you're basically hitting all the little bumps, but they're all, you know, pretty much at, in all screws. So every so often there's a seam full of rivets, all the way down, 12 stories.
It was like sliding down the 12-foot lead.
And it's a one-way system. You go down, but you can't get up. Okay, so the industry standards that we're talking about lead, about the OSHA, you know what I'm saying? So what I'd like to do is take another small little break, and let's see if anybody wants to see if there's any last-minute donuts over there, and let's open it up now to the questions that you may have related to things that are in the book, questions about what you want to do with your city. So let's take a little 10-minute break, and if anybody has any money, and we've got an emergency. What can we do? All right? While I'm here talking, I also have, if anybody, you know, there's a form that they got to fill out that's from that goes through Robert back to Kim Spencer, which is, you know, you got to sign up for the 4 or for the 2. You got to make sure you're filled out. If anybody that hasn't given Katie and your business card or your email, if you want a link to any of the classes, again, you go on YouTube and you type in Firescape Seminar, and there's about 400 or 500 videos in that category that you can watch. Training with firefighters, training with building inspectors, classes like this recorded. You can actually go in there and put in Seminar Lowell, and you'll see the last class that we did just like this. So usually within 2 to 4 weeks of a class, this class gets put up there. So if somebody didn't come to this class, or some of your fire prevention guys want to get some additional training, you can just send them this link and go to YouTube and pick any of the links, or go to the nationalfirescapeassociation.org, and there's all the links, including the name and emails of the people who hosted the class. So Robert's name and his phone number and his email is there in case you want to get some feedback as to whether or not it was a good activity or a good idea. Now, let's talk about emergencies. You get to a situation, and I'm going to use an example. The Haverhill guy came up and said, hey, I'm the Haverhill guy. I wrote the mayor a violation on there many times, but they have no money to fix it. Little old lady down the street, we violated her fire escape. She has no money to fix it. The fire escape is under foreclosure. The fire escape is, you know, in bankruptcy. What do you do? And they got tenants inside with kids. What can you do? The fire escape needs 20 grand to fix it. What do you do? One of the suggestions we've made nationwide is basically you use scaffolding. Stairs, approved, installed scaffolding by a company who comes in and puts in a scaffolding stairway that basically eliminates the need for the fire escape. So for $1,000 or $2,000 a month, a professional scaffolding company comes in and creates another stair tower for whatever the situation may be. Now, if your fire department and your building department agree upon it, that it's a temporary second means, temporary, the violation is not removed. It's just basically suspended. You know, you're basically holding on to something to buy yourself some time. The little old lady doesn't get the building shut down, but you basically created another means of egress using a staircase that has rails, and they usually use the 8 and 8 or the 7-Eleven. They have these staircases ready to go at these scaffolding companies. Okay? And how they get to the windows, they do that. They'll create some sort of platform that feeds the stair tower. But, you know, for $1,000, $2,000, you can basically answer a situation where nobody has any money, and you really can't shut down the building because you're going to put 4 families out in the street. And the owner cannot afford the hotel. You know what I'm saying? So that'd be the landlord or something. And the city doesn't want to basically put everybody in a hotel and then go after this guy. And as you know, whenever you do a lot of these things, you basically lien the property, right? Eventually, by liening the property, this all has to get paid back, otherwise the city's gonna take it, correct? Whenever something like this drastic happens, right? So, fire escapes, whenever they were so bad that nobody has any money to fix it, remember scaffolding. Properly installed by an insured scaffolding company will answer a lot of residential three-story situations a lot with $1,000 a month. Okay. We also talked about a fire tower down in Waltham, and that every now and then the city has a school, a tower, or something of a fire escape. Can you use the DPW to basically repair the fire escape with an iron worker or somebody that has metal training? The answer is yes. It's just nuts and bolts changing. What you need is to basically hire somebody to watch, and that's the engineer. So you get the engineer oversight, and then you bring it internally, and you try to fix it. If you have no money, you try to fix it using a temporary hire. You know what I'm saying? You basically say, hey, we were quoted $35,000 to fix this fire escape. It's got to go out to bid. It's got to go out to public bid. There's 3, 6, 9 months of time that you don't have, and you know that $35,000 job is going to come back at 80 grand. Because who's going to bid on it? The local Joe iron worker that can bid it? No, because he doesn't have the work, he doesn't have the bond, he doesn't have this, he doesn't have all the requirements. So who bids it? Joe Contractor. And Joe Contractor knows it's a $35,000 job, but what's Joe charge you? He charges you 100 grand to do the job, and he's going to sub it over to the Joe iron worker anyway. So a lot of times when you don't have the money and you have to get it fixed, what you can do, and we've sometimes told people, them to do this, we sometimes have had cities when it has to go out to public bid, that basically they create a bid, they bring in the bidders. So they basically walk in and find 5, 10 iron workers in the 50-mile radius to bid the job. Then they get a Joe Contractor that has the bond and has everything that they need, and they say, listen, we're going to find the bid. We want you to oversee the bid. We'll give you a 20% markup on whatever we get as a final bid. So that's one way. If the local iron workers don't meet your requirements to do the job, you basically have a contractor that you work with all the time, and you say, hey, whatever number I finally get, I want you to just have marked up 20% to basically, because you have the bonding. And I'm just using a number. This could be any other number, but it's a $100,000 job that became 120 because ABC Contractors is now using Joe Iron Works to do the job. Because ABC now will wait for their money, but they did it for 120, but they subbed it already because you already gave them the winning bid at 100. So that's another way to when on this niche market, you put it out to general bid and you're going to get some crazy numbers on a repair. But if you want to do it internally, get a structural engineer to basically finger paint it for dummies, go to the local iron hall and basically hire 2 local iron workers to come and work for the city directly on payroll. And if they take a month or 2 to do the job. So scaffolding and direct hire might sometimes save you some money. You know what I'm saying? But you can band-aid a lot of fire escapes on what's called an emergency repair, and that is you get a connection on a fire escape that has full of rust, cut out the bolt and put a new bolt in there and leave the rust. That tread ain't going anywhere. That's called an emergency repair. That makes it functional, not certifiable. So in the Havel situation, 3 treads are out? Yes, those 3 treads get put back in. The rest of the treads all get looked at to make sure that none of them are ready to fall through hammer testing or whatever. And anything that's questionable, you're not removing the rust at that time, you're just putting in a new bolt. But what you're not doing is welding the nose with a there's no welding showing up. You're basically using connections to basically guarantee and make it functional. And to help the vendor not carry any liability, a fire escape that he made functional is still not certifiable. So you're not supposed to use it anyway unless it's a fire emergency. And if anything should happen during a fire emergency, the city's or the owner of that building on a fire escape that was just made functional is fully liable for it, not the vendor. So a Band-Aid on any fire escape does not put the vendor in the liability. It still keeps the client holding all the liability. They just made it functional until such time permanent repairs take effect. Okay? So we have an hour, and let's open it up to questions so that if, we can answer questions. Then I can get you onto the website. I want to show you some of the videos that are out there, and we'll put a couple of downtown walkarounds, and I'll be able to actually find some Lowell walk-arounds of what we saw when we did. But let's just open up to questions now of anything in the book, anything you guys saw, whatever questions you may have. Anybody want to open up to some questions? I'll jump at once.
You'll look at Chris back there.
Chris?
So we had a couple of fire escapes that you did in the city, right? Was it one or two?
I think it was just, I think two, most. Just a couple. We've done a lot of inspections, but we haven't done a lot of work. You guys have had activities going on here with other engineers and other vendors that have come in, and this is the greatest thing, is that this is not something that only one person can do. We basically just raised the bar that any engineer can inspect in the city, any vendor can repair in the city. The standard has just been raised, the bar from the floor has been raised to a height that everybody kind of understands. And the explanation is, if you're gonna spot repair it, you're gonna load test it. And if you're gonna, and again, no false load test. I think there was some conversation that said some people were misclassifying their letters and saying, I performed a load test, which kind of pissed a lot of people off. You wanna explain what that was?
We had a letter back about 2 months ago, big medium one. They had gone out there and they load tested a complete fire escape. And the typical wording inside, basically said that the load test was never performed because it's a paint. So we just, Cisco, it kind of did a double, it kind of came almost like it was coming from you. The Cisco had load tested it. So I called him right away because it didn't sound like something.
What was the severance?
The beauty about it is you're not gonna get a lot of load tests. That's the beauty. Whenever somebody says they're gonna load test, we have this whole class to say we're not load testing. We don't want to load test. Buys no bolts, buys no paint. It's really, but somebody's gonna say, no, I just want to spot repair it, and say, great, then we need to proceed to a load test. To have assurances that the remaining 50 to 75-year-old connections and bolts, or rivets, or square head bolts are good. A load test will affirm that, that's all. Load test for a typical residential is anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000. Could be as high as 8 if it's a bigger residential, but 3,000 to 5,000. And then on commercial applications, it starts at 5,000 to 8,000, and they can go as high as 12,000 to 15,000. In California, we've done some load testing, it's 25, 35. We did the Bob Hope building there. I think it was almost $40,000 to load test a 10-story fire escape.
And the load test is not done on just the areas that were repaired, it's done on the.
The whole system, yeah. So again, if this is one of my typical platforms, and this is 4 by 20, there's 80 square feet here, times 100 pounds, 8,000 pounds of sand, water, cables, on top of this for 30 minutes. And it can't deflect no more than 3/16.
Just doing it is dangerous.
Just doing it is dangerous.
We have had several instances where the affidavits of control construction, whether it's fire escape or just other control construction, we still do our inspections, and I've had occasion to reject the affidavits. I encourage any other building inspectors to not accept those. We don't accept them anymore. A business owner will send a notice saying he needs to get his fire escape certified. And then without doing anything, all of a sudden in the mail, I get something from an engineer who has that qualifying language, but he's saying, yeah, I've inspected the property at 3 Smith Street, the fire escape code. When you go out and look at it, the rust is still there. Obviously, that's the person who was there about anything. So we don't accept those just because, and I think in the past, people have felt, okay, well, that covers my ass, I can accept this, put it in the file, but it doesn't do anything as far as because we want real compliance, so we don't accept those anymore. And I've had a couple of success stories, like right out here, cobblestones. I have approved their ironwork that they had come in to get repairs, and they also did scraping and painting. And, so it's a matter of training, but it's very small.
I wanted to ask, what have you done for a program for getting fire escapes in compliance? Sending out letters to owners, property owners?
Yeah, it started with sending out the letters. It starts next with both fire prevention as well as the city building inspectors. When they're doing this periodic inspections, 110 inspections, that they notify the owner. We're trying to soft enforcement approach to begin with. Set a priority, and we've fallen behind, but we're going to reinitiate this. If it's a building that has, a lot of them are mixed use, but they have people sleeping there, there's residential units there, and the fire escape is needed as a second means of egress. It's not an obsolete secondary thing, it's actually in use and service. Those are the ones that we want to go after. We have a few that we're gonna have to find the owner, and the owner isn't gonna do anything unless we force the issue, maybe threatening to evacuate the building. But we haven't gotten to that point yet, but that's the process. We send out the information, so it's the education, most of which I've gotten from Cisco, put it in the city of Lowell letterhead, we send it out to everybody, and then just say, if you have a fire escape building. Part of the problem is, just the strictly business use buildings, unless there's work going on, we don't go into them generally. We have several of those, where the main issue there is if there's a fire in that building, these guys are gonna have to decide whether or not to go. And I know at least in Lowell, they don't like to go on fire escapes at all, because they know they're all antiquated. So the goal will be to get them flagged, and that's what we're moving to, so that
Get
if
academy
fire
inspectors.
shows up, they actually can see, certification saying it's been inspected and it's safe. They can save time and lives by being able to use it. We actually had one case. Another thing that we've done is there's a captain in charge of fire prevention, and he's worked with me to send violation notices out. If you notice too, this copy that I gave everybody, it's got both my department's CO as well as fire department CO. So it's a joint notification working with fire. It just gives it more credibility and more enforcement, we do it together.
It's important to work directly with fire.
Absolutely.
You guys using the ticketing system also? Do you have that?
Well, we haven't used it for this yet, but we do have it.
I think you guys would like to see it fire.
Absolutely.
In the middle of the night.
I mean, part of the problem is it hasn't been enforced forever. So now all of a sudden, people that are otherwise in compliance, we can't just come down hard on all at once. We want to, but it really isn't going to work too well, because we'll get nothing but calls to city council. Because everybody knows the city council. We're trying to do it the way that kind of makes sense. And what we've done is we've given them their certificate of inspection, the COI 110.
Right.
So that we need to get this resolved before next year, or the next time the issue. We're nervous about doing that. Most cases, for a reason.
Yeah, we say that it's a 3 to 5 year. You're gonna have to get your feet wet, kind of get a feeling, try to stabilize the situation, call it a tagging program. We just want to identify that we have 1,000 fire escapes or 1,200 fire escapes. And once you've identified them, you want to get them tagged, and then they're basically tagged. They
We
met the certification
prioritize, like I
requirement.
said, based on whether or not it's a building that has people sleeping there, there's dwelling units in the building, and it's served by one of these, that makes it a more serious issue.
So we did a walkthrough, and let me show you.
Training, here we are in Lowell, Massachusetts. Bob, say your last name, Marsilia, Italiano?
That's it.
Exactly.
We're here looking at the building commissioner in the city of Lowell.
Just finished
We have
doing
a
a class
class
just like
right
this
down
that
by
day.
our feet. What's the greatest thing about this is we're gonna be able to see all the rust and the connections. We're gonna see all original hardware in squares. We're gonna, basically, we had a class today.
Know where it is.
And we'll-
Data intern.
Yeah, backside of City Alley. Behind the Giovanni, this is the end of the alley, right across Middle Street.
There's another one behind the gate too, whatever happened to that. No, that's not the word. What's that behind, the lock gates?
Now, walk in.
It's got all those fire escape, fire.
Fire station.
Did you cut the lock?
I'm not gonna miss this guy.
We get it.
Well, I don't mind.
Technical difficulties.
I let him complain directly to me.
Just see if we have the free Wi-Fi they had.
How many fire escapes have you found?
Oh, yeah, there's thousands, but I mean, how many have we found? Hundreds. We don't have a list yet.
Yeah.
That's, it sounds easy. but
Yeah,
actually
no, it
to do
doesn't
this,
sound easy.
I need somebody full-time just to do fire escape.
But that's the whole
Well,
problem.
ideally, I think the others have from placard and number.
I mean, do you guys get all your multi-families done?
Well, what we're doing now is that's another thing we haven't done, and we just gonna mortgage a lot of the rental units in the city, buildings that don't work. We've never been in, we're supposed to be inspecting them every 5 years. So we haven't been able to, so we've got, a new initiative to do that, we're gonna capture fire escapes at the same time. Whenever these buildings have fire escapes, we'll go out to inspect them, flag them.
Try to use the wireless.
What's that take?
Wireless or no?
Yeah,
We're gonna sign, but I don't wanna be like one of those guys on TV, just goes like this, and they say, you know, for 25 years, you're supposed to have been inspecting things.
You're Tom Wiley.
Oh, it slipped through the cracks.
Yeah.
It has.
Well, I mean, it's not a manpower.
Yeah, but, we gotta do something. We can't just keep saying we don't have the manpower, because we gotta do something. Because there are some in the city right now that are man traps.
Yeah.
The only reason why nothing's happened is because there hasn't been a fire there.
Right.
But like these guys, I'll tell you, they won't even go on. But if there are people on, they have to. If there's a fire, what are you gonna do? You're gonna go on a fire escape, whether it's falling off the building or not, and then things will change, just like the building code has evolved because of tragedy. As soon as one of these fire escapes falls in one of our towns, everybody's gonna be on the scene. Why did you do this? So at least, we've sent these out, started the process.
That's a good idea.
But that's only the beginning, It's only the beginning.
Now, how many people have notified you since receiving that?
Everybody in the city.
Right, and how many people have gotten back to you?
Half a dozen. And, there are the people that are responsible, that are proactive. All it takes is a little push, and they say, okay, they hire somebody to do the work.
Yeah, you're all good people.
But the ones that work in here, that run down,
Yeah.
rental unit buildings where people are in there, separate fire, there's no sprinklers. Might have smoke. Something will happen. So it's gonna be, this is a big process, but all we can do is start.
And how long ago did you start?
3 new inspectors, because we lost it, 3 guys. And so, everything's sort of down, going on. And now we've got 2 pieces, so we're back there. Again, it's just critical. Who's here from Lowell? I mean Lawrence. Did I meet you guys? Somebody's here from Lawrence. They already left, but then nobody from building came on then. Didn't you? Kate, you invited the building commissioner and inspectors from Lawrence, right?
We did, yeah, and the 2 guys that were here from fire prevention asked me if someone was coming from building, and I said, well, they were the only 2 that replied to me. And he's like, oh, we got it forwarded to us from the building commissioner,
He
so.
called, it's Peter Blanchard, right?
Yes.
I thought he said he was coming. I thought-
He never replied back to me and said he was coming, just the 2 gentlemen that they were sitting right there.
Oh, you know what he did? He sent me an email asking me for all my procedures, including fire escape stuff. That's what I, we didn't come to the meeting. Not sending them.
That's gonna be a worse problem there than, pretty much.
Cisco, I didn't tell you this, but we actually had, while you're working on that, we had a fire in an apartment building. It was built in the 70s. And the exact scenario described, it wasn't fire escapes, fire balconies, wood frame, no stairs to grade, only 2 stories. But when the fire department got there, the building wasn't, fully engulfed, but they had to go into rescue. They had, 50 people on these different balconies. That was lawfully apartment buildings. But what happened after that, the building wasn't sprinkled, is both the fire department and myself sent a joint notice to the building board saying you either have to provide a second means of egress or you have to sprinkle the building. So they did an analysis, they checked to see if they could put in, compliant stairways from each of these balconies. And what they ended up doing was sprinkling the building. Okay, but we would have accepted, because the code will allow, secondary egress from those balconies. And when they went and checked the pricing, it was cheaper. But the bottom line is the building is safe enough.
Right, if I may, we get this call quite often with the whole sprinkler question. The problem is your insurance company, this is 3 years from now, 5 years from now, an insurance adjuster or insurance inspector goes through it in 1 year, and he walks in there and he goes, where's your second means of egress? And the person says, well, we had that looked at and we had an option, sprinkler or second means of egress. And the guy from the insurance company says, well, that's nice, but we want a second means of egress on all our buildings that we insure. So here's a 30-day letter that says you're not going to have any insurance in 30 days until you get a second means of egress here. Oh, but I got my sprinkler. You need both now. So be careful on that, that the insurance company is overriding you guys with that and saying, it's nice that the sprinkler is there, but should there be no water pressure, how are you gonna get out then? And so they basically say you're a risk, so they're gonna put that person into a pool of high risk. Okay, so I think this is, it's finally got enough juice here.
We're in the city of Lowell, and we have a fire escape right down by our feet. What's the greatest thing about this is we're gonna be able to see all the rust in the connections. We're gonna see all original hardware in squares. We're gonna basically, he had a class today, and what we're basically looking at is a fire escape that no more paint is on it. So this is a perfect one because I can get my nose right into it. And this is a perfect example of everything that can go wrong with a fire escape. Let's talk about this one. And then we're gonna go look at these other ones and these other ones and a big monster that's on the back. So this may be a 10 to 15 minute video, but we don't, what is on here works there. So let's take a look. More paint than rust or more rust than paint? So that's all you need. Let's say they knew you were coming, Bob, and they painted
It's
it. They
a
want
violation, it's not
What are you
painted,
looking
and
for
it's
next?
structural problem. As soon as you see there's no paint, you got a violation.
Original hardware. So let's show people what original hardware is. This is a square bolt. Square bolts. Square bolts. And some of these, so
50 to
now
75 years
before
old.
we get on that side, Bob, how about grading? Any pop grading of the spacers? So what that means is when a fireman or a person steps and your leg goes through that, you get locked. You can't save yourself. Because now you're trapped with a bear trap. How about rusty tears? Any rusty tears indicating that water's getting into the connection? How about cement blowout into the back? See the cement blowout? Okay, let's take a look. Any damage from a truck or anything? Any bends on this fire escape? Okay? Yeah, here, let's take a look at is it square heads or rivets on the supports? Are those original or have they been switched out in the past 50 to 75 years? Original. So let this fire escape rust this much. How many years? To get 100% of your paint off your fire escape? At least 25. Is there any paint that you can still see left? But even though there's no more paint on this, does this thing, which is older than 1978, have lead still in it? So it still has lead. Let's look at all the rust in between the connections. All this rust. Let's look at your treads. Missing.
Yeah, it looks like, let's just let it load up a little bit more right there while it's loading. But here we have a fire escape that's basically from the ground. So you don't have to go up. Two things, you don't have to write a violation. You look up, it hasn't been painted. Isn't both the fire code and the building code require routine maintenance? Maintenance meaning what? Changing bolts or keeping it painted? So as soon as you walk onto any job, you look up and you see no paint, well, it's failed the requirement, even on the Mass Building Code. There's a structural element to it and there's a painting element. So if you're not painting it, it's already making every connection suspect. Because as I gave you the class, I said I got two pieces of metal and I break the paint, what's it start affecting? The joint. As soon as the joint is compromised and I have to, how can I guarantee it that it's still good? Paint it and then do what to it? Load test it. So now, anything that somebody let rust completely, and there's no more paint left on the fire escape, is every joint compromised.
Yeah.
Who's going to investigate that to give you back a determination whether or not they're good or bad? The engineer. Can he see inside these joints? Can he load test it to give you the verification you need? Or can he then at that time say, you know what, it's a guess game here, so why don't we just change all these bolts out and avoid load test, not waste these thousands of dollars in water bags, sand bags, or cabling. Let's buy paint and bolts with it. And what's it by 5 years from now? Is there a load test 5 years from now if we certified? And if you keep it maintained and keep it painted like you're supposed to, how long can you extend the no load test requirement? 15 to 25 years, right? See if,
Spacers? And let's look over here underneath. Better before you climb up above. If I had my hammer, I'd do a hammer test. Any rust in any of the connections? Rust in all of them, the bulge. You see all the bulges, right?
those
Is there
guys are ready
anything
to
that
drop
if you're
somebody.
looking up straight up, can you see the sky if you look straight up on some of these? You look over here. See that one right there? Can you look straight up?
So that means there's
How about this
nothing
over
in
here?
there.
Feel all
That
right?
tread's ready to drop.
Any of these
Look right
bolts
through the
that are
tread.
holding as best they can, any of them totally gone, are they all suspect in your mind?
And you said
Would you
because the
allow
hex
anything
bolts
to
are
be
60
welded
to 75
and remain
years.
in place?
50 to
That's
75 years old. Hex
50 to
rivets are 75 to 100 years old.
Yeah.
Rivets was
Now,
the first
let's see
method.
how it lands on the
Square bolts
ground.
came next.
Is this all rotting in the ground? So the channel is completely gone?
Snow buildup at the feet, always rot the feet out.
Okay. So, and how much rust? Quarter inch every 25 years. How long you got to rust there? Every 5 years. All these treads are quarter, 3/8, half inch. If I was to stomp along on these, you think some of these would give way? Some of them have been patched with some welded bars. This is a typical repair when these flats give out.
So you can't do that anymore,
Lots
you
of
can't
bends,
weld.
smashes.
You can make sandwiches, but you can't weld those because of the lead content on the treads.
This is a perfect candidate of how bad things get when you just leave them alone. Have your inspectors ever walked down these alleyways?
Oh, hold that question. So, one of the things that's been talked about now, so that everybody knows, anything that's with spacers, you have to be careful. You can't guarantee those. We can create reinforcement sandwiches, that's just to buy another 5 years or so. But most old 50 to 75-year-old grading should be replaced. The new grading coming in should be galvanized, primed and painted. You're gonna get 40, 50 years out of that.
If you reinforce it, do you have to load test it?
Well, the main thing that's holding the fire escape is the two sidewalls. I mean, the two sidewalls on either side. That's for the load testing. The grading, all you're doing when you sandwich the flats is to keep them from shifting. So the sandwich is basically reinforcing. What we're saying to the client is that we can't guarantee this tread that it's not gonna break. So you may have one of the flats break in between the sandwich, but it's not enough to create a trip hazard or a capture. But it's basically saying these will start breaking over time in the future. We just can't tell which one's gonna. So this is a Band-Aid. This sandwich is nothing but a Band-Aid to buy some more time. And usually it's just another 5 years that you buy. And you're making the client aware that he should change the grading now, but sometimes you only have a 25% failure rate in all the grading. But you sandwich it all basically under the refurbishment.
Yeah. And why didn't they write this one up? Maybe they didn't and nobody paid attention. Maybe they didn't know what to look for. And if it ain't broke, why fix it? There's also other reasons too. It's not a priority. People think these are great. They've always been great. That nobody's ever fell 25 years ago. Nobody fell 50 years ago. And they think that these things are indestructible. But now this is what I call a hidden time bomb. This is a grenade with a pin already pulled out of it. A fireman or somebody coming out of that top is going to fall down these stairs and get hurt or jammed or stuck.
And you
So
got
that,
rest your
this is part of the 101.3, all exterior steel wooden stairs. Okay? Is this an exterior steel wooden stair?
It is.
Is there enough water falling on it? Got obstructions? This is fairly new, this is 10, 15 years old. Nailed together, safe, solid, you think? We wiggle it a little bit. Okay? Does this need to be inspected on the 101.3?
It does.
So all exterior steel wooden stairs need to be inspected. Need a permit to repair this? Renovator's license? No paint on it, but they can stain it, there's no paint. How about this one? All exterior steel wooden stairs? What is this?
What is it?
Steel company.
Where is it? What is it?
What is that place? It's just the back of commercial restaurants, offices.
Yeah, this is just one of the back alleys. This is actually one that has a basement access hole there also, and it has a stair there with no rail. So, all exterior steel wooden stairs. So there's always some other violations that come into play when they do these. So,
There, this is an handrail. We're missing anything here? Handrails are missing. Let's take a look at that. There's water falling on it. These are all metal. Any bulging rails or, this looks like an adaptation to a bulkhead plus a stair. But it's missing its rail. It's fairly, what, 50 to 25 years old, you estimate? Does this need to be inspected and have a cert on this?
It does.
Okay, so because it's 101, all exterior steel wooden stairs. Now, let's take a look at it.
we'll get there slowly. But now we're getting to that big one with a big gate. And that's an issue with all, you have a common way, it can't be locked in. So here we are in the back of a building. We have this huge gate, and it has cables and it had chains locking it. So the firemen can't get in without cutting through to get in. And the tenants, should they come down the fire escape, get locked in the back area there as an area of refuge.
This one. Now, this is going to happen a lot of times. You can't even get access. So let's talk about access. This door right here, which has a lock, is illegal because now these people cannot egress. It's very simple. On the inside, there's a push bar. That's all you do. So whenever you have these gates that do whatever this thing is doing here for the trucks,
And break
that must
ins.
be able to be pushed out. So that's a simple modification to make that a crash bar door. And then if you mesh enough of this,
You can also mesh the fire escape instead of this area, open up this area so that the trash can get in and out, and at the fire escape, create a cage at the bottom that has a crash bar.
you know, you mesh this, then nobody can put their hand in and force the door open. So that's an easy, but it's illegal to lock somebody in a cage. Now, let's talk about from down here.
I think some of those are apartments, right?
So the main thing that we did on this building, and I'll kind of, you know, finish it up from here on what we were looking at, is down from below, you could look up and find that the fire escapes were not painted. You saw from down below that the cement into the wall was all spalling. You saw from below square head bolts with the naked eye. So he didn't have to go up and let's see how bad it really is. It's already showing that the routine maintenance did not occur. They kept it painted, and now it's been 10, 15 years since they last painted it, but the original hardware is an indication that they've been doing the right thing. The wrong thing is that there have been plenty of paint being put on these fire escapes because the guys that have been fixing these have been the painters, the landscapers, the florists, the maintenance guys, tenants from the building, helping the landlord, you know, cut on the rent. And what do? They paint everything, and whenever you have a problem, what do you hide it with? Silicone, duct tape. If you have a big gash in the C channel and there's a hole through it, what do you hide it with? Duct tape. Paint it black, and if you want to make it look like rust, grab a little bit of dirt, throw it on the duct tape. What's it look like? Surface rust. I've seen it all. I've seen all kinds of things out there. So,
I can't get any more closer. From down here, more
so
paint,
there's
rust,
about
more rust.
100 of these, or 100 plus videos of us walking around the United States and doing exactly this, and many, many examples of crossovers, examples of
From down here,
cantilevers.
and you don't, I know you can't see to the 5th or 6th floor. You usually look at the 1st floor. Any evidence of maintenance, any shiny hex head bolts in this 50 to 75-year-old structure.
Now, I see it makes some square head and ribbons.
Square heads and
Square heads
rivets.
and rivets.
So they've changed the windows on this, they've changed the boiler on this place, they've changed the roof on this place several times. What have they
And
never
there's a release
touched?
arm on there. And you can see that would let that
They
cantilever
spent
drop
50
to
grand on the
50%.
foyer. What didn't they spend 5 grand
I'm
on?
not sure whether even the cantilever is balanced correctly. And you're looking into the cement into the walls. Anything that you want to share?
So I'll pause it there, but basically what you have is the ability to train fire people, building inspectors, with videos that are sitting there. So if you go to YouTube and you just type in Fire Escape Academy, Fire Escape Seminar, Fire Escape Inspection, Fire Escape Load Test, what you're going to see is about 1,000 videos out there. Majority of the videos we have way through, if you go through what's listed on the front of your thing, it says the National Fire Escape Association. We started that organization because we had so much documentation out there that we needed an avenue to put it out there. So it's a new organization that's just started. It's still in its infancy. Still going to be looking for, in the future, funding to basically help, you know, get the word out that fire escapes are in a bad way. But a lot of the videos and everything is either through YouTube or through the National Fire Escape Association. You just log on, link in, and start playing. So if some of the people in your departments haven't made it here, have them watch the video. If they don't have time to do downtown walk-arounds in their city, I mean, I think we even have one from Westboro with Gene Novak doing walk-arounds, and basically we walked around a building that you guys recently had it taken care of, right? So you had an engineer that came out, took control of the situation, a vendor that came out and did all the work, and basically it was their first guinea pig. It's a 3 to 5 year program. You're not going to get this overnight. It took 75 years to screw this up. You can't fix it overnight. There's too much blowback, but on a case-by-case basis, either because somebody pulled a permit on a building, and you know, in prioritization, and you basically what you get is onesie twosies. You just keep getting better at it, and just like sprinklers and alarms, after a while, the standard has been set, and you don't need any special documentation to say this is how we do it. Everybody does it this way, and that is, you know, you really need to get the engineer oversight on these things to basically make sure that somebody knows what the vendor's doing, and make sure that that vendor just pulls a permit. And then your building official is the final guy walking out to make sure that the vendor and the engineer is doing the right job, because every now and then, they too drop the ball. We all drop balls. Everybody's going to drop a ball. But after a while, nobody's dropping balls on sprinkler systems. Nobody's dropping balls on alarm systems. Nobody's, because after a while, it's just unacceptable for any substandard work to be done. But in the beginning, are you gonna let a few things, you know, kind of, because everybody's sort of getting the feel as to what the marketplace, because as you mentioned before, these are mom and pop shops that are gonna do this work, who right now, because of the EPA and OSHA, might not be able to get back into this work because of those requirements plus insurance requirements. So it may be going back to sort of steel erector type of companies to come out and play with these because they have the proper insurance, they have the proper requirements. So as this sort of modifies and this industry starts getting its legs, you're going to sort of see the change in that more responsible engineers are going to start stepping up, more responsible ironwork companies are going to start stepping up and getting the work done. But in the meantime, you're going to get questions like the wood ones, what do we do with this one? The mixed breed ones, which is metal and wood ones. The decks that have been on the back of a porch decks that have been on the back of a building for 50 years. What do you do with those? You know what I'm saying? And they look and they're already tilting. They're already, you know, and the wood is old. And you're like, you know, what are we doing? This guy's facing a $75,000 rebuild on a building that's, you know, Section 8 housing. And those porches are part of the means of egress because there's porches and these rickety stairs going down the back. Well, on a case-by-case basis, you're just going to address that. And let's use the porch as an example. A porch, you know, 50 years ago was a place you go hang to get out of the heat, talk with your neighbors. Today a porch is for what? Storage. Bicycles, cans. So a lot of times the rear decks or the rear porches on these can get totally taken down. And you know what you put up? A skinny little fire escape. And instead of $75,000, they can put up $15,000, $20,000 fire escape on what used to be a big deck and everybody wants to hang. Nobody's hanging on porches. So some of these decks are all going to transform into basically back to basic standard industrial fire escape systems to satisfy the egress. And at that time, you guys can discuss whether or not this is a fire escape or is it a exterior stair that we really need to 7-11, 36 inches wide, make it so firemen can go up while they're coming down kind of thing. Those can be discussed at that time. Let's open up some more questions that you guys might have. But, is there anything that we said today that is you think is against code? Is there anything that you actually brought up a good question in earlier?
Lead, yeah.
Oh, the lead.
Yeah, regarding lead work, I was researching OSHA and EPA. You are allowed to do it, it's just you have to follow procedures. Rushing away the painted area or area orange wood as well. Follow safety procedures.
You have to hire a licensed D-letter, that's usually not an ironworker guy, to come and basically abate the area. So I'm going to weld this tread, or which I should just rebolt, but you know, it's all economics. And so in order for me to fix this connection, I have to have an abater come down and basically abate the whole area. And I can come down and just start welding. But on fire escapes, 99% of all the fire escapes built in the United States is bolted connection. Why would I have a welder come in? And for me to just change that bolt, I don't need to de-lead the area. Just break the bolts, put in 2 new bolts, we're done.
Which we here would require a hot permit.
Right.
Hot permit for welding.
And welding is, again, welding was the basically the cheat for the many years. You know that fire escapes needed $10,000 worth of work, but for $2,000, somebody came in and welded the whole thing tight. And yeah, and for 1, 2, or 3 years, it wasn't going to fall. But as soon as the rust kept growing, it ripped off a lot of the welds. And basically, which ones? Nobody knows. So you're not going to be seeing too many hot permit requests anyway on a fire escape repair because since they're all older than 1978 and they all presume to have lead as per the EPA, nobody's going to be welding them on them anyway. So the repair is erect a set, change bolts. Okay. So any other questions that come up? Because I think we can probably end this by 12:30 and still call it 4 hours. It's Robert's call.
Oh, that's fine, I think you covered everything that I wanted to cover.
Okay. So
Typically, what kind of foundations do you see if an exterior egress like that has a base? Is it 8 feet or is it how?
the typical
cement
base
block?
that I find is usually 1 foot deep, 2 feet deep the most at a base, and then sonos, I'll see a lot of sonos that are old, 50 to 75 years, are only 2 feet deep. Very few are You know, but you can easily, next to an existing foundation, create a sonotube situation. But again, it's all depending on, if it's solid and it's not listing in any way, we would identify that and share that with the building inspector as to whether or not they want to bring it up to code or, you know, but if she's sitting solid there on the ground and she hasn't shifted in any way, we discussed that with the city. That's why I report back to the city official with photographs. There's two things, what we say and what he sees. You know, because the thing is great, it's like, what are you talking about? This thing's a wreck. So you basically, by sharing your opinion with somebody with a photograph, you better know what you're talking about. Otherwise, the city official will tear you apart. Yes?
Now, I know we've sent out a lot of letters and stuff like that. Are you communicating with our office when you've been called in?
Well, as far as any inspections that we've done, there hasn't been a lot of inspections that we've been getting for the Lowell area. And a lot of times, the reason why is because they'll call local structural engineers from Lowell. So it's not that we're getting all the calls. If they go through the internet side of things, we may pick up a call, and whenever that happens, we share the information with you guys. But there's, I don't know, have you done 100, 200, 300 fire escape repairs,
Well,
permits?
I have gotten a lot of opinion letters from, going to CORs.
Yeah. So again, the opinion letters is basically an engineer that somebody else found that went out and they looked and then they sent him a letter and he now needs to educate them on, listen, what I really need you to do is give me more information, some photographs. So he's spending a lot of time training people. And that's one of the things we suggest is having a class. As you go into a couple of years into this, we recommend having a class here, but now inviting structural engineers and iron workers from the area who have been either involved in some activity to come to a class and basically, and we did that in Portland. We had a class of about 150, and we're in the class, we had firefighters, building inspectors, vendors that did the repair work, and structural engineers in the area to basically have a free-for-all to see if they could tear apart this scenario. Like, oh, this is crazy, what are you doing? And that all got recorded. And then it was in Portland, Oregon, that at the end, we also recorded the walk-around. So imagine 25 guys that basically stuck around at the end, and we were walking down the Portland streets looking at everybody's fire escape. It was like a parade, and all these people were coming out, what are you looking at my fire escape for? And we were actually having a training class, but it was a great class to watch because you get to see everybody's opinion. Because engineers have opinions on this, you know what I'm saying? And again, it's just an opinion, but they can't back it up with what the code says. The code says load tested or other evidence of strength. Their other evidence of strength has been an opinion with a disclaimer clause, which you guys are now saying, that worked when the thing was 25 years old. That almost kind of worked when the thing was 50 years old. Right now, these things are 75 plus years old, and you still want to hand me an opinion on grandma? She can't run. She needs, hip replacement, you know what I'm saying? Yes.
Well, I brought it up earlier when you said you reject these, some of these engineers. What's the alternative then? What do they have to do to get it?
Well, they have to actually do either destructive testing or replacement support, like Cisco was saying, where they actually endorse, a program where they give me a scope of work where they show they're putting a new channel into epoxy bolts. I think that's happened once. But I mean, every building official is within his rights. Just because it's a stamped affidavit or a signed affidavit from a registered design professional, we still have the right to say, we reject it because. I mean, you go out there and look at it, you can see, he basically just sent the form letter out. And he feels comfortable because he has that little qualifying section in there that says, based on what I can see. So if it fails where it's connected to the building, where the channel goes in, you didn't inspect it, you can say, so I mean, it doesn't serve any purpose to accept those, effectively. I mean, maybe our ass is covered because we have an affidavit, but it doesn't make the people in the building safe, so I don't have any problem rejecting those.
They were basically submitting an exam. If you read the code, it says examine, test, or certify. So they were performing an exam and submitting it as the actual test or the certification. So after they perform an exam that looks good to me, they would call that a certification. When in actuality it was an exam.
In Westboro, we created a
You need to come
form
up with a
that
plan
is
for this.
certified, and then we'll give them a certificate of inspection after that. We issued one so far. We only have 12 fire escapes there.
Right, so he only has 12 that he's aware of. And usually when you start counting all exterior steel wood stairs, you're going to have a lot more. It's not only going to be 12, it's going to be 1,200 when you start really dealing with some of the residential and everything. But when you look at the affidavit, if you look at the preliminary affidavit and the final affidavit, it itself acts like a final confidence test if you read the language on it.
have you had an opportunity to look forward into the codes? In other words, in Massachusetts, we're working with the 2009 I codes, and we're, other than the energy codes, skipping over 2012. Are you involved with the people who are promulgating the 2015 codes and seeing, looking forward, seeing whether it's going to expand on the inspection requirements or testing certifications and so forth?
Well, as they say, the national, the Fire Escape Reform Act of 2013, you're looking at the one guy that nationally is bringing this up as an issue, and that's because I'm in the trade. But there's nobody doing anything. And as far as, am I involved? I only have, my watch only has 24 hours. My stock options that I have with Cisco Systems, I only own one, maybe, or none. So it's really, we work with people who basically get me involved with somebody. I can explain. I've done a lot of these shows, I don't want to say shows, these seminars free. These are usually all free that I do these, and usually because I'm in the area. So if I happen to be in Seattle, I'll do a class in Seattle. If I happen to be in LA, I'll do a class in LA because I'm doing something else in the area, and that's how you keep the cost down. But there is really nobody concerned about the fire escape side of these things, and basically whenever there's a code change of any kind, they copy whatever was said about fire escapes in the older codes, and they just bring forward, you've got one paragraph for the International Building Code, and that's it. You got one for the NFPA, and that's it. In the whole book, that's the entire statement for how to deal with the fire escape inspection. Now, to build a new one, there's all these other documents, so 42 high and all that stuff, but to inspect it. And then on the International Fire Code, there's nothing. It's one paragraph that says, depending on the structural condition, the load test may be ordered by the official. That's it. So it basically threw everything back down to you guys, but as far as the language, but it did change, and I can send you the language in Oregon, in that they actually took this class and they actually added this language of clarification that basically says everything that we're talking about here, and that is a fire escape should have a confidence test. Confidence test should then be used with engineer oversight to basically watch the vendor repairing the fire escape. A confidence test should be issued upon completion of the fire escape repair and load tested, or use the confidence test to say it was certified to eliminate the load test.
Well, that's the reason I was asking you, because typically things find their way into the code because either there's a disaster, somebody invented something, or there's a vendor out there who wants to make it happen. And since you...
Well, I mean, in the right direction. If I'll speak, and I get introduced to a lot of people, like anything else. Sometimes you get a lot of resistance. We found YouTube is actually, it's not like anything else. Sometimes you have to surround the castle. You know what I'm saying? And that's what happens every now and then. Sometimes I get more out of this meeting than I have in a general meeting of where somebody says, "Oh, you should go to the state, and the state will issue a letter." They're busy. They're all busy.
You know what's going to happen? I mean, hopefully, you and other initiatives will allow different communities to be more proactive so that they can get ahead of it. But I really think what will happen is what's happened with everything, that we're dealing with issues directly resulting from the station nightclub fire that we never dealt with before. That was the result of that. So God forbid, one of these balconies fail and either a firefighter or a resident dies, then everything is going to change and we'll be forced to enforce what's in there. However, we have to do it. Rather than wait for that to happen, want to get out ahead of it. Well, that's what's going to happen. God forbid there'll be another incident like in the 70s. Somebody dies and all of a sudden...
And they got videotaped.
It's going to be focused. Now it'll be even more so. It'll be everywhere. And then those people that said, "Oh, we don't have the resources to do this," they won't be able to get away with just saying that. I don't want to be in that position.
Right. And like I said, it took 75 years to screw this up, so it's going to take 3 to 5 years to get your feet wet, change slowly on, and again, if you're dealing with every building that has a permit on it, that's already the start. So if you have 10,000 buildings in your community, and 1,000 buildings a year basically pull permits, you're already started. And believe me, when you're dealing with a fire escape on this building, and my neighbor has a fire escape, but he's not pulling a permit that week, but he hears from his neighbors like, "Hey, you know what they're doing with these fire escapes, man? They made me put this tag on here," and really? No, I haven't touched mine in 30 years. Well, it's changed, man. Now the city sent out this letter, and because I pulled a permit to change a light bulb in here, now I couldn't close my permit, or buying and selling of property. You know what I'm saying? Or the new occupancy requirements. As soon as you just make it, you make it standard checklist items. So you buy and sell a piece of property, you have to get a new occupancy. Issue a new occupancy for the.
Basically, they have to get something from fire prevention, saying the smoke detectors are.
So in the buying and selling of property, you should basically put in it that, okay, here's your new Smoke detector, okay, where's your affidavit? So it's all just checklist items you added. And some of the housing guys, they have a checklist of, it's a million things you gotta check off. Just add one thing is, okay, this apartment looks like it's gonna be a good one. Where's your affidavit for confirming your second means of egress? You can walk into any building during an inspection at the front and say, hi, I'm here to inspect your building for your sheetrock, whatever. Before I get started, do you have an interior or exterior means of egress? Oh, exterior, great. I'm gonna inspect your sheetrock, I need to see a copy of the affidavit. No, it's in the back, you wanna go look? No, I don't even wanna go look. Just need a copy of the affidavit.
Well, the great way is doing the multi-family inspection program, but most cities and towns just can't keep up with it. I mean, it's true. And there's just too many buildings, too many inspections, and not enough people.
You guys may wanna speak with Cambridge and Boston. I think Boston takes $50. Every time you submit the affidavit, you gotta submit a filing fee of $50. So I don't know if you can create a program that's self-funded by the filing fee. Cambridge, I think it's $100 to file that 5-year affidavit. So if you have 8,500 fire escapes like they have in Boston, I don't know if it could be a self-funded, I don't know how you guys do it.
Could be, city council would have to vote on it.
Right. But in Cambridge and in Somerville, they have a filing fee to issue the certificate. It's $50 and $100. Okay? So that's pretty much it. I'll hang around for another 15 minutes or so. Thanks a lot for the
Thank you.
coming. This got recorded, and hopefully in 2 to 4 weeks, you'll see